All right, so what does it look like on the control side backwards, start to finish of a project? So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I'll send them the G-code programs and they just need to run it on the control, just like any job. So we're going to just go to File and we'll go to Load, and then we'll grab the program that we want to run. Okay. So the next step that we want to go from here is into the Toolpath tab. And it's just a good idea to get right in here right away, do a regen on your toolpath, maybe hit display mode and then regen. This has to do with like soft limits and depending on where the software thinks your machine is right now. But what's most important here is this program limits. Okay, so we're going to do a regen and we're going to look at our Z number here. Okay, so this is telling us how far down in Z we're going because we're zeroing top corner is really where we're going to zero is over here. So we just want to pay attention to this number so we verify that's the depth that we programmed. The other thing I generally do is run a simulated program run, and this is going to tell us how long it's going to take to run. And that's what we're looking at in here is really the Z range here and then also this simulated run. Okay, when we're ready to run the program, we'll jog over, set 0. On these machines, we don't reference all home. We just zero, touch off and go. It's really simple. Other than that, it's cycle start when you're ready to run. And then you can hit reset in order to stop the machine if you have a problem, and that will just shut it down. Then you can, hit reset again. It's going to stop the program. You'll be able to rewind the program. You can hit tab in order to get your jog handle, and you can jog up and jog down and jog out of the way. All right, so that's a little bit about the control software, right? Now, the next thing we'd be looking at is the software. So, at this point, the job is already programmed, it's organized, everything's set up. We have some layers over here used to isolate different pieces of the geometry. We have a reference for our zero location. We have our stock lineup and part lineup, so we know how much clearance we have because on this table, we just screw the material to the work. So, we're right close to our limit, not quite at our limit, but, we have 48 inches here. So a little bit of the spacing as far as how close we are, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, let's say we turn off all of that stuff and we just work with, let's say, the part geometry. Let's see if I have that on its own layer. That's the stock. That's some of the offsets, and this is some of this stuff. So if you want to move geometry from one layer to another, you just select it, right? So if you're not in selection mode, you go into selection mode, you select with a window pick like that, right click, modify attributes layer. I'm going to move this over to layer 3, let's say. Okay, so now I'm just working with the geometry. All right, mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Over here, this is our start position. Okay, so when we highlight that, we can zoom in and see where the arrow is and what direction it's cutting in. And if we want to change what direction, we can right click and choose modify. And then we can click on the arrow to switch which way it's cutting. Okay, so you just click on the arrow. All right. Or on the other side of it. It'll also move the position as well. These holes are kind of oblong. We can kind of see they're made up of a bunch of little entities versus a true arc, and even how they cut, they're a little oblong, but that's probably on purpose to make it easier to line up with the backer. All right, we just want to make sure these are going counterclockwise. We'll say okay. All right, so that's what we're looking at there. When we're over here, this is the job setup. So we have the job. The job is tied to a machine. The machine is tied to a controller. So that affects our posting. When we post our code, it's based on this machine and this controller. That gets our code over here, right? So we can do post, or we can do post and save as, and that will let us save into a directory. Okay. All right. So that's the job, the machine, the post. This is our stock geometry. So the way that I set it up is I always draw the stock as a shape, and then you can just select it. So this is a wireframe, so I can like clear my selection, So it's looking for a chain for me to select. So I'll just shift left click on that, hit calculate, and now I have my stock defined. 0, we're always like top, this corner on this setup on this table, we're zeroing over here and then on the top of the material. So when we zero the job, when we're over in mock and we're jogging around, you can zero X, Y separately than Z. So really once the stock is set up on the table, we can jog over to the corner here, right, close to the limit, and we can say 0 for X and Y. So we jog the tool over to here, and then once it's in that position, we go 0, 0, and now we set it in X and Y, right? But then we can jog the tool up and away, and we can touch off anywhere on the material, just jog down till the tool touches the material, and then we come over to here, and then we hit 0. So we can zero our Z separately, okay? But in our job setup, our 0 or our origin is going to be on this corner, and that's where all the position moves are going to be, and that's going to match the 0 that we're setting here. I'm just referencing how you don't have to be on X and Y 0 in order to set Z 0. You could set Z 0 independently. All of them you can set independently. All right, so let's get back over to here. So we have our 0, and then in this case, we just have this single machining feature. So this is what we have selected. And, we're going to have it come in and do the inside holes first, and then we'll have it do the outside. Okay. If we look at this, if we right click on the operation and we choose backplot, you'll see it starts over in this corner, and then it's going to work its way through each of those holes. And then it's going to come down to this front, then it moves to the outside, and then it cuts around, and then it's done. Okay. So that's the cutting order. All right. And then if we double click this operation here, this is the cutter size we're using, and then these are the speeds and feeds. So how fast when we're cutting along, and then how fast when we're coming down into the material. Okay, there's a bunch of other settings here, but really at this point, those don't matter. So we're going to just choose finish. All right, this job is actually, we want to set this up as a template. We're cutting a certain depth. Let me go to the depth. The depth is, if we get back in here, if we double click on this operation, and then we go to feature, this is how deep we're cutting. Okay, so we can make that, it's a positive number, but it's going to post a negative number. So this is just how deep you're going to cut. All right, and then over here, this is if you'll go to parameters, and then if multiple steps, this is where you set, how much per pass to get down. Okay, so we're going to just do this in a single pass. This is what the depth is. We'll go ahead and compute, right? All right, so that's this job set up. Now, if we've already run this on the machine and it was successful, we want to save this job as a template so that way we can use it again. So we're going to right click on here. We'll come down to save job as template, and then we'll give it a name. Okay, so you save it in the directory there, and then you give it a name. Now, what's cool about that is you can delete this job, or start a new file, right? And you're able to do a new job from template, right? So job from template, and then you can pick which one you want. So this is this one here. We're going to say okay, and that brings in all those same settings. So now what I want to do is pull up this geometry here, because this is what I want to cut. So I'm just going to right click and reselect. I'm going to all this geometry, and then I'm going to choose okay. And then I'm going to right click and compute, and then you'll see, it's cutting around. Now, one of the things you'll notice is the way that it's cutting isn't the same as the way that I had it cutting. It's cutting in a different order. Now, not that that's necessarily the worst thing, but it's not the same. And the other thing we'll notice is by default, it's cutting on the wrong side of the line. Okay, so we need to update both those things, or we may want to update both of those things. Okay, to reverse the cutting direction, you can get out of that window there. Just go to this default chain start point, right click, reverse, and then, so you made a change, so now you want to update it. So just go to the operation and just choose, right click and choose compute. All right, so now if we zoom in, we can see the inside is cutting on the inside and the outside is cutting on the outside. Okay, but we want to control the cut order. We want it to cut in a certain order to optimize, how it's run on the machine and what we expect. Okay, so to do that, we're going to remove our geometry, and then we're going to right click and reselect. And then now we're going to actually select this in the order we want it to cut in. So I'm going to select that one, and then this one, and then this one. Okay. And in the order in which we select it, we want that to be the cutting order. So after we select all our inside shapes, we're going to hold down Shift. We're going to select our outside shape. Okay. Everything else stays the same. We'll choose OK. We want to update the toolpath, so we're going to right click and choose Compute. And now you can see it's updated. Okay. So for me, it's updated on this one because I already went in here and I made a change to the machine sequence and I set it to no sorting. Okay, so if you have it set to no sorting, then it will follow your selection order. By default, I think it's set to closest. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish that. All right, the other thing, we want to check the direction again, so we'll reverse this and compute. All right, so now it's cutting correctly on one side, but not on the other. Okay, so what we'll end up doing is going through and modifying these positions here. So I like to get them to start in the same position and go in the same direction, right? So we'll go through and update all of those, and that's what we're looking at there. Okay, now let's go back a step further. This is what you start with. Usually it's a DXF file out of Flexi or Corel, or it might be a paper print. And, this one's already drawn to size, so we don't need to worry about that, but we do need to lay it out for the table. Okay, so what's our step there? We're going to just create a new layer. We're going to call this stock. All right, now we got our stock layer. The next thing we're going to do is just hide these other layers. And then we're going to draw a rectangle. Okay, this is a 48 by 48, and I'm going to reference this lower corner because that's our 0. Okay, and say OK and cancel. So now we have this here and we have that there. So we want to rotate this geometry this way, and then we want to position it over here close to the corner. Okay, so let's turn the stock layer off. All right. Focus just on the geometry, then it's utilities and rotate. We'll window pick all of this. This is going to be Z minus 90, and that just rotates it 90 degrees that way. I click OK and then cancel. All right, so now that's orientated the geometry, to align with the stock. The next thing is getting a reference point for this corner, because we want to reference this corner right here when we move it. Okay, so that's a point from entities, intersection. Let's get rid of these other ones. So it's intersection on extension, and it's this one and that one, and okay. So that gets us that point. So now we can select all this and move it. So we're going to do a utilities and translate, and we'll window pick all of this. Okay, now we're going to do a pick for our reference point, and we'll select the point that we just created. And then for our endpoint, we're going to index it off the corner. So let's say a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch there. And then we say OK, and then cancel, and then view all. All right, so now this geometry is aligned with the stock. Now, most of the time, if I'm sending a program over, I'm going to kind of create some dimensions so that it makes it easier for the user to see what's going on. So, and I also want to verify like screw locations and things like that, how much clearance I have, so we might come in and create another layer and then do evaluate and a horizontal dimension and go from here to there and say, okay, this is the call out that we have for that. We might do the same thing vertically here. The other thing I'll do is I'll reference 0. So I'll grab this corner so they know where 0 is. So that way, when we have our setup, we know what our clearances are. All right. Same thing here from this side to this side, how much room do we have? And a lot of times this has to do with how careful they have to be with their setup, and especially when you're trying to cut a part that's close to the limits of the machine. All right, so that's what we're looking at there. Now, we have our geometry set up. We want to program the job now. So we're going to go into the CAM and we're going to do job from template. All right. Again, we're going to grab this template we already saved from the previous job, and then we're going to choose OK. So that loads everything in. Now, from the stock, it's based on a full sheet versus a half sheet. So, maybe I'll update the stock. So I go to the stock, right click, stock wizard. Okay, this is going to be a wireframe stock. All right, I'm going to hold shift on my keyboard, left click on this profile, choose calculate, and that updates it. Now the thickness, this is set to 1 inch. So this is actually going to be this value. All right, so it's 3/16. And then from that, we can just choose OK. So we updated what our stock is going to look like. And then over here, this is our profile cut. So let's turn off the other geometry. And we want to come in and select this. So we're going to do right click, reselect. And we'll come in and select in the order we want it to cut in. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter. You can just let it cut in any order. Other times, you kind of just like to control which way it's going. Sometimes when you do this, you forget to offset to the correct size and you make mistakes. So, you got to slow down and pay attention to what you're doing. But that all looks good. We're going to choose OK. This start point, we're going to modify this. I know I want this one going that way. All right, and these, there's a couple of holes here, so I'm just going to go in and verify them. Now, I could do this easier. Like, there's faster ways to do this, but this workflow, I don't mind. I'm just kind of going through and visually verifying everything, making sure all these arrows are starting in the same spot and going in the same direction. And they are, so I choose OK. I'm going to come here and I'm going to go compute, and that generates all my toolpath. Okay, so, all right, the next step I would do is post, and that's going to post the code. This way we have all our code here. And then from this, you can right click and save as, and then save it where you want. So that's like from finish to start, and then start back to finish. We would just come back over into mock, and then we would load up our program and go through that process. When we load up the program, the first step we want to do is grab the program. From there, we're going to go to toolpath. We're going to do a regen here. We're going to verify our dimensions. We'll look at our Z. Looks good. We'll come over to simulate program. We'll run this through. We'll look at our cycle time. Everything looks good. We might touch off on Z normally is where we're at. And then from there, it's cycle start and run your program. All right. On this machine, we use the dial that's on the machine to turn down or up the spindle. You can use your feed rate override here. If you want to slow down how fast it's cutting, you can slow it down, or you can speed this up here. All right. So that way, if you got a heavy cut, you can slow it down. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thanks.